Briar Rose, Chapter 19. And the thorns parted before him. The simple statement was always accompanied in Gemma's telling by a moment of silence from all her listeners. Only once had Becca broken the silence early. She had to go to the bathroom quite desperately, yet didn't want to leave, afraid Gemma would finish the story without her. She knew the story by heart, but she didn't want to miss it. There was always the possibility that this time something new would happen. And the thorns parted before him, Gemma said. On the sofa, the three girls breathed a deep, urgent breath. Hurry, Gemma, Becca said. Gemma looked startled, her washed-out blue eyes opening wide. Those kinds of interruptions were so unlike Becca, who all of the girls understood the rhythm of the story. Shut up, Syl had said, and poked Becca with a sharp elbow. Becca felt the wetness slip out through her pants, soaking into the gold-colored velour cushion. She started to cry as much for the loss of the story as the damp spot she knew would soon be discovered. Look what Baby did. It was Shanna who noticed first. Wet pants, cried Syl. Gemma, she's disgusting. She's only a little girl, and you two are big ones. Gemma picked Becca up and held her close, never minding the wetness now running down Becca's leg, not caring that Becca was squirming with embarrassment and rage and disappointment. I want the rest of the story, Becca cried. I want the rest. I want the hall and the mist and the kiss and... You know it already, said Gemma, and she carried Becca up the back stairs and ran a bath for her. Only when Becca was sitting in the bath with the special bubbles mounting upon each side did Gemma finish the story. Just for her, Syl and Shanna refused to come in and listen. Chapter 20. We could have taken a train, Magda explained as they set out from the car rental. It is much how do you say cheap, to change in Lublin. I checked, Becca said. There were only 2 trains a day to Chelmno. And what would we do once we got there? She steered the gray Fiat carefully onto Route 81 as Magda instructed her with a great flurry of hand-wavings. She was already thinking of the car as charger as much as the expense on her Visa card as its reference to steeds of old. Walk, said Magda, but I much appreciate the the car. Besides, Becca continued smiling, I am a tourist. I want to see pretty places and take photographs and eat at good restaurants. Then I very much appreciate the car, Magda said. Besides, if your grandmother had a palace, I would not do to walk. We must be in the grand style. It would be expected of the granddaughter of what? A countess? A princess? Yes, a princess, Becca said. Magda clapped her hands. You did not tell me. Then she made a grimace. But what a terrible accent. That was my grandmother was called before she came to America. We don't know if it was a title or a nickname. Pardon me, but what is a nickname? Magda asked. A pet name, a family name, Becca explained. And I am called Kotek, which means little cat, Magda said. By my mother and father first, and sometimes still by my auntie. Becca was about to ask why, when the route took a turn and a sign said Plock. Beside it, the land ran back flat and green, seemingly untouched. Isn't that one of our towns? Becca asked. We are not interested, Magda said. Why not? It is not of interest. There is a cathedral there, and then tall chimneys, and they are... Her hands described a volcano, spewing fire and smoke, Becca said. Yes, so exactly. One at the beginning of the city, one at the end, like on either side of bookends, Becca said. So we will stop in Turin. You will like it. It is famous for its... Oh, I haven't the word. You will see when we are there. Can I guess? Becca asked. It is kind of like a cake with wonderful spices and baked in the shape of grand ladies and gentlemen, maybe. Magda looked impish, even in the shape of a princess. She pronounced it the way Becca had and giggled. Gingerbread, Becca guessed. Magda shook her head, puzzled. I am not sure. The road to Turin was flat, and they could see the Vistula sometimes near, sometimes far, wide and gray like clay. Roll down your window, Magda said, though the air was crisp and cold. Sometimes you can smell the cake baking in the factory. But though they both drew in great breaths as they passed row after row of red brick buildings, Becca smelled nothing but a kind of old city odor until they stopped. Here, Magda said, we will park and walk. It is best when you can walk in a Polish city, yes? Yes, Becca agreed heartily. They walked around admiring the old buildings and stopped at last in a kind of cafe. They chose to sit outside under a nondescript umbrella that kept the intermittent sun from their faces. Magda said, I will order the cakes, but you must tell me if you are preferring tea or coffee. Tea, please, Becca said. Within minutes they had a plateful of gingerbread nobility, with 2 cups of very dark tea and heavy white utilitarian ceramic mugs. Gingerbread, Becca pronounced. Gingerbread, why not cake? Ginger cake, Magda asked. I don't know, Becca admitted. We must discover this sometime, Magda said. You are a journalist. You will find out and write to me the reason. You like gingerbread? Yes and yes. Good, Magda said, and with a great grin bit the head off of a gingery countess. You, Becca mumbled around her own bite of gingerbread, are the most up person I have ever met. Up? Yes. That is good? Yes. What does it mean? Magda's accent was particularly less made pronounced by her mouthful of cookie. It means optimistic, happy, full of joy. Ah, yes, but I am Polish. Is everybody who is Polish optimistic? If one is not optimistic in Poland, there is too much to weep about, Magda said. In the not-so-past history are many tragedies. Every family can recite them. The blood of so many martyrs are still wet on our soil. Once, her face took a dreary expression, the rest of the gingerbread forgotten on her plate. Once I was not so optimistic, but I was young and did not know these things, and so can be forgiven. I was not so up. My mother, she was Jewish, my father Catholic. Only neither were doing their religions. Practicing, Becca put in softly, we would say practicing. How odd to practice a religion like a violin. What a strange language English is. Magda giggled, and her eyebrows danced left to right again. I was not brought up in either one. Becca nodded and sipped her tea. Then one day our teacher saw that we knew little of Poland's real history, not the history of heroes and generals, but the history of the people, or rather that we knew of the immediate past. We saw it as the same kind of thing, just history, but not real, not having anything to do with us. I am not saying this right. You are perfectly clear, only drink your tea, it's getting cold. Like an obedient little girl, Magda drank down her tea in a single gulp. Good, I like being perfectly clear. So our teacher made us a trip. Do you have this in America? Class trips? All the time. To places of significant historical interest, Becca smiled, to see history. She took us to Lublin, outside of Lublin is Majdanek. It was a camp during the war. There was a monument of gray stones, a great mausoleum. That is the word? Yes, Becca barely whispered. A mausoleum dedicated to the 360,000 men and women, and she told us even children of our own ages who were murdered and discarded like animal carcasses. So close to where we lived, that is what she said. She told us how the young like us and the elderly like our grandparents, and the sick like Mr. Lazesko, who cleaned our school but had bad lungs, were put into ovens, burned up as if they had been meat or bread. She pushed the plate with the cake away from her with a sudden angry movement. She said the children were whipped with cattle whips and their bodies piled onto lorries like filth and taken into the rose garden, which is what the guards called the gas chamber. I remember every word she said. But then most of us were crying. Some of the older boys were even sobbing loudly, and she said, see how green and lovely are the lawns around the memorial. Think of what horrors are buried there 40 years ago right under our feet. Think about what it is that has so fertilized this rich soil. She made us look at the gray stones for a long time. Then she had the bus take us home. Magda was silent for a moment. She did not return to teach the next year. No, Becca said. No, Magda sighed. I loved her very much. She was my first. Oh, love affair is the wrong word. I was 11 years old. She did not touch me in any way. We would say you had a crush on her. Crush. Magda's hand described a downward arc as if crushing something. Becca nodded. How odd, yet how true. My young heart was crushed, especially when she had not returned. She was a very good teacher. And, Becca urged. Ah, you went an ending to the story. Not every story has an end, my friend Becca. But friend Magda, I suspect this has one. Magda laughed delightedly and pulled the plate with which the cake back towards her. She broke off a piece and put it in her mouth, rolling her eyes as if to emphasize how delicious it was. After she swallowed and dabbed at her lips in an exaggerated fashion with the cloth napkin, she sighed. Oh yes, an ending. From that day on I started practicing, yes, being Jewish. I joined with other students who were Jewish and went to their homes for the holidays. Not all the holidays were kept, you know. My mother did not approve. And your father? He did not care. He just did not want me Catholic. Do you practice your Jewishness now? Becca asked. I do not practice the holidays, Magda said. Celebrate? Yes, I do not practice or celebrate the holidays. I do not speak or read Hebrew, but I read history at university, and especially I read Holocaust history. I am a member of the Polish Jewish Student League. That's how I got your name, Becca reminded her. Through the Krakow group. Yes, so you see, if my teacher had not taken us to that horrible place, you and I would not become friends. Becca smiled. I would not have had that, and I would not have had such splendid gingerbread. They paid and left, walking arm in arm along the little boulevard. At first Becca was embarrassed, but after they passed many girls doing the same, she relaxed. And now to Chelmno. I think we take a little longer and go west to Bydiscus. I think you will like the streets and buildings there, and soon it will be time for lunch. But we have just eaten, Becca said. If you once smell bigos and pierogies, once you have a taste of Nilmski, you will not resist further. I have eaten all those. Well, maybe not bigos. I live in a Polish farm community, you know. Magda stopped, withdrew her arm from Becca's, and looked at her seriously. But you have not eaten in Poland. First, though, I must show you the monument for Nicholas Copernic. You will call him Nicholas Copernicus. Have you heard of him? Of course I've heard of him. While Magda had gotten that twinkle in her eye again, I have heard how poorly Americans have their education. Nicholas Copernicus was born here in Turin, and there are many wonderful houses in the old town. I would love to live here some day, I think. Becca smiled and decided that for the rest of the day she would play tourist and let Magda take her around. After that she was determined to continue her search. Gemma, she was sure, would approve. They ate lunch in a restaurant. Becca accepted that Magda ordered with good grace a dish of strong stew, which was the bigos Magda had mentioned, and something that was a cross between a blintz and a crepe filled with cheese and covered with sour cream sauce that was sweet and filling. If I ate like this every day, Becca warned, I wouldn't even fit into the size 12 jeans I brought you. She paid for the entire meal, both hers and Magda's, and was surprised at how cheap it was. They traveled on to Bydgoszcz, past fields of yellow lupin blowing distractedly in the intermittent breezes. Overhead the white clouds looked fresh-washed. Willows stood knee-deep in pockets of the river, not the weeping kind that Becca was used to, but a variety that lifted its branches straight up from the massive trunks. Becca commented on them. They do not grow that way by nature, Magda explained, but we cut them back to get branches to make baskets. You know baskets? Willow baskets, Becca explained. I never thought they were made of willow. You Americans never stop to be in amazement, Magda said. Cease to amaze me, corrected Becca. Yes. Becca pulled along the shoulder of the road and stopped the car. A photograph? Asked Magda. Yes, you in the willows. Only I will not stand in the water. I do not grow well that way. Magda giggled at her joke, and Becca joined her laughter. She took the picture while they were both standing laughing, then took a second just in case. One more on the road, they passed large fields and then stands of white birch gleaming in the afternoon light. I love birch trees, Becca commented. We have one with a triple trunk on our front lawn. The birch is a favorite of mine, too, Magda said. Do you know what the birch tree means in Poland? No, Becca glanced over at her. My professor told me once it was believed birch trees heal souls of the dead. Even today at Pentecost, what we call Zilon Switiki, the green holiday, people cut down branches of the birch and bring them into the house to put around the windows. It is a bit pagan here still, yes? Becca looked back at the road. Must have been a lot of birch trees at Majdanek. Magda made a strange sound, something between a cough and a sigh. My friend Becca, there are birch trees everywhere in Poland. They arrived an hour later in Bydgoszcz and booked into the hotel the Burda. First time I ever stayed in a hotel without bowels, Becca commented as they unpacked. Magda shook her head. There are 2 bowels in the bath, Becca. It is not so poor a country as that. The hotel is 3 stars. Becca tried a few times to explain the joke, realized there was a vowel after all, and gave it up as a bad joke. They went downstairs for a walk. The evening, though, had begun to turn chilly. Becca was glad for the sweater she had brought along, and Magda was still in a short-sleeved blouse. When Becca saw her shiver surreptitiously, she announced, I am cold, Magda, even though my sweater. Let's go back to the hotel. Magda gave her no argument, but as they walked, they planned the trip for the next day. It is only 1.5 hour if you drive, Becca, Magda said. How long if you drive? Forever, I am afraid. I do not drive an auto in cars. Magda said, I cannot afford a car and live in Warsaw. We have trains and buses to every place I want to go. But is it true everyone in America has at least 1 car? Not quite everyone, Becca said. Do you? Of course. But I live in the country, Becca said quickly, and there are no buses or trains that come near my house. No buses, no trains. Clearly it was a stunning idea to Magda. They reached the hotel, still deep in a discussion of transportation, and went right into the hotel's dining room. Though Becca swore she couldn't eat a thing, still being full from lunch, the waiter, who spoke English even better than Magda, with Magda's help, ordered her a full meal. When it came, the medallions of veal and the thin, delicate French fries were too appealing to resist. Becca finished then the small green peas and a piece of cream cake besides. "Tomorrow you will try borscht," Magda said. "My grandmother made borscht," Becca said. "No, thank you." "Hot beet soup." She wrinkled her nose. "You have never had it in Poland," Magda said. They slept in the narrow twin beds. Auntie was wrong. Magda sometimes snored, though lightly. Becca suspected it was because of the unfamiliar mattress. By the time she finally fell asleep, those light snores were the only sound in the hotel.